Welcome to our deep dive into the mesmerizing world of ancient Egyptian cat worshippers. Today, we're peeling back the layers of a culture whose fascination with felines was as profound as it was peculiar, and often delightfully humorous. Sure, we may see cats as pampered companions today, curling up on our laptops or staring down at us from atop the highest shelves. But in ancient Egypt, these whiskered wonders were far more than just cute pets. They were divine creatures, living symbols of power, protection, and mystery. Their veneration reached levels that bordered on the theatrical, and their presence was woven into the very fabric of Egyptian life. Imagine a society where harming a cat wasn't just frowned upon, it could get you into serious legal trouble, where families mourned the loss of a feline with the same depth of sorrow as losing a loved one, and where cats were mummified with as much care as pharaohs and nobles. Sounds wild, right? Well, buckle up, because the world we're about to explore is full of fascinating rituals, intriguing beliefs, and some downright entertaining stories. We'll uncover the curious roles cats played, from keeping homes pest-free to serving as mystical protectors. You'll meet the goddess Bastet, part lioness, part sleek domestic cat, who embodied both gentle nurturing and fierce strength in one divine feline form. We'll look at how these sacred animals were celebrated in everyday life and how their status reflected wealth and social standing. So, if you've ever caught your cat giving you that regal stare from atop your furniture, just know your furry friend might be channeling some ancient Egyptian ancestry. Join us as we unravel the quirky, captivating, and little known history of cat worship in ancient Egypt, where fact meets feline fascination. Get ready for a perfectly entertaining and enlightening journey into the secret world of these sacred whiskered icons. Chapter 1: The Rise of Cat Worship, Society, Religion, and the Feline Connection. When we think about ancient Egypt, most people picture towering pyramids, golden tombs, and mighty pharaohs. But behind those grand images lies a quieter, furrier story, one where cats were not just animals, but sacred beings woven deeply into Egyptian life. The story of cat worship begins more than 5,000 years ago, around 3000 BCE, in the fertile lands along the Nile River. Agriculture was the backbone of Egyptian civilization. Fields of wheat and barley stretched as far as the eye could see. But there was a problem: rodents. Mice and rats constantly threatened to devour the precious grain stores that fed entire cities. Farmers desperately needed a way to protect their harvest. Enter the cat. Cats, with their sharp eyes and quick reflexes, were natural hunters. They started to hang around human settlements, feasting on the rodents that plagued the grain stores. Egyptians quickly noticed this helpful behavior, and cats gradually became valued members of households. But Egyptians didn't just see cats as useful animals, they saw them as divine creatures. In Egyptian culture, everything had a spiritual significance. Animals weren't simply creatures, they were messengers and manifestations of gods. Each animal's unique traits were linked to divine qualities. Cats, with their mysterious eyes that seemed to glow in the dark and their silent, graceful movements, were perfect symbols for protection, grace, and mystery. Their dual nature, both nurturing and fierce, mirrored important aspects of Egyptian spirituality. At the heart of this worship was Bastet, the goddess often depicted as a lioness or a domestic cat. Bastet wasn't just any deity, she was the protector of the home, fertility, motherhood, and joy. Early on, she was a fierce lioness warrior goddess, guarding the pharaoh and fighting off evil spirits. Over time, as domestic cats became more common, her image softened into a gentle, nurturing figure, while still holding her protective power. Because of this connection, cats were treated like living symbols of Bastet herself. Egyptian families often kept cats as protectors of their homes, believing their presence kept away evil and bad luck. The reverence for cats extended into laws and social customs. Killing a cat, even accidentally, was a crime punishable by death, according to some accounts. Families fed their cats special meals, sometimes even fish and milk, and made sure their feline companions lived in comfort. But this reverence wasn't limited to life. When cats died, Egyptians mourned deeply. Eyebrows were shaved off as a sign of grief, a striking visual reminder of loss. Families sometimes went so far as to mummify their cats, treating their remains with the same respect as royalty, ensuring their journey into the afterlife. This emotional bond between Egyptians and their cats was truly special. It went beyond companionship or practicality. It was spiritual and cultural, woven tightly into their understanding of the world. As we move forward, keep in mind that this relationship between humans and cats is one of the longest and most fascinating in history. It shaped not just how Egyptians lived, but how they saw the universe itself, a world where gods walked among us in the form of furry, mysterious creatures. Chapter 2: The Feline Deities, Cats in Ancient Egyptian Religion and Mythology. To truly understand why cats held such an exalted place in ancient Egypt, we need to dive deeper into the rich tapestry of their religion and mythology. The Egyptians didn't just see cats as everyday animals. They saw them as living embodiments of divine power. At the center of this feline devotion stood Bastet, one of the most beloved goddesses of the Egyptian pantheon. Originally portrayed as a fierce lioness, Bastet was the daughter of Ra, the sun god and protector of the pharaoh. Over time, her image evolved from the intimidating lioness into a gentler, domestic cat form, but her protective qualities remained. Bastet was a complex deity, embodying two very different sides of feline nature. On one hand, the nurturing, warm-hearted mother protecting her children; on the other, a fierce warrior goddess who fought against evil and chaos. This duality made her worship incredibly popular, especially among women and families. Temples dedicated to Bastet, like the famous one in Bubastis, were vibrant centers of worship. Pilgrims would travel from far and wide to honor her, offering gifts, prayers, and participating in grand festivals filled with music, dancing, and feasting. Imagine thousands of people celebrating the goddess of cats with joy and devotion, cats roaming freely among the crowds, treated as sacred beings. But Bastet wasn't the only feline deity. Another important figure was Sekhmet, a lioness goddess associated with war and healing. While Bastet embodied the gentler side, Sekhmet represented the raw, untamed power of felines, fierce, destructive, and unstoppable. Together, these goddesses illustrated the full spectrum of cat symbolism in Egyptian culture. Cats also appeared frequently in hieroglyphics and religious art. You'd find them perched on the arms of nobility, guarding sacred scrolls, or standing sentinel at temple gates. Their graceful forms were symbols of protection, fertility, and the divine balance between chaos and order. One fascinating belief was that cats had supernatural powers to ward off evil spirits and demons. Egyptians believed that cats could see into the spirit world, guarding homes from harmful magic and bringing good fortune. This spiritual role made cats essential household guardians, far beyond mere pets. But what about the everyday Egyptian? How did this divine status influence their lives? Owning a cat was not only a spiritual choice, it was a sign of prestige. Families who kept cats, especially multiple cats, were often viewed as prosperous and respected. It indicated they had the means to care for these sacred creatures, elevating their social standing. There are countless stories from ancient texts and papyri illustrating the sacred relationship between humans and cats. One such tale tells of an Egyptian man who risked everything to save a cat during a fire, knowing the cat's survival was tied to the favor of Bastet herself. Cats were also central figures in folklore and myth. Some legends told of cats' ability to transform into goddesses, or of their eyes holding magical properties. The evil eye curse was believed to be deflected by the protective gaze of a cat, making them powerful talismans. All of this cultural significance influenced the Egyptians' treatment of cats, not only as spiritual beings, but also as family members. They fed them with special care, created beautiful collars and jewelry, and decorated their homes with cat motifs. Even today, archaeologists uncover cat statues, amulets, and offerings dedicated to these sacred animals, evidence of how deeply ingrained cat worship was in Egyptian society. In this chapter, we've only just scratched the surface of the feline deities' world. Their presence shaped religion, art, culture, and daily life in ways that still fascinate us thousands of years later. Chapter 3: Everyday Life of Cat Worshippers, Furry Royalty and the Homes They Ruled. Imagine waking up in the heart of ancient Egypt, sunlight pouring through linen curtains, the warm scent of baked bread in the air, and the soft purring of a sleek, graceful cat curled at your feet. For many ancient Egyptians, this wasn't just a pleasant morning, it was a spiritual one. Cats were more than animals. They were protectors, status symbols, and even family. To understand just how deeply cats were embedded into Egyptian daily life, we need to look beyond temples and tombs and step into the bustling, dusty streets of a Nile-side village. or the cool, shaded courtyards of a wealthy noble's estate. A day in the life coexisting with sacred whiskers. In a typical Egyptian household, cats roamed freely. They weren't locked in cages or relegated to the outdoors. No, they were honored guests, often with designated sleeping areas, favorite cushions, and even decorative collars. In wealthier homes, cats might have been adorned with golden or beaded necklaces, dyed fabrics, and tiny amulets to protect their spiritual well-being. Children grew up alongside cats and were taught from a young age to treat them with reverence. Cats were never shouted at or harmed. In fact, disciplining a cat harshly could damage a family's social image, or more seriously, lead to legal consequences. There's evidence to suggest that the killing of a cat, accidental or intentional, was met with fierce public outrage, and in some cases, the offender could be put to death. Food-wise, cats were often fed the choicest scraps, grilled fish, cooked meats, or mixtures of grain and milk. Pet bowls, often made from alabaster or clay, have been found in archaeological digs, indicating a level of care and domestication we might not expect from such a distant era. And these weren't just isolated stories from the elite. Even working-class families held cats in high regard. A street vendor might pause midday to pour water for a neighborhood cat. Farmers might leave food out for barn cats who kept rodents at bay. The love and admiration transcended class. The social dynamics of cat ownership. Cat ownership was more than companionship. It was a social status indicator. Families who owned multiple cats were seen as blessed and prosperous. The logic was simple. If you could afford to feed and care for several sacred animals, you must be doing well. In urban centers like Thebes or Memphis, this status extended into business as well. Merchants and shopkeepers sometimes kept cats in their storefronts, not just to chase off pests, but to attract good fortune. A cat sleeping peacefully by the door was seen as a sign of divine favor. It said, "This place is protected. This place is blessed." The presence of cats also shaped relationships. Gifts of cats, or even cat-themed jewelry, were exchanged among families and lovers. Some wealthy individuals had cats painted into their tomb murals, depicted lounging beside them or curled at their feet, symbolizing eternal companionship, feline antics, and everyday humor. Despite all the reverence, Egyptians weren't blind to the more comical side of feline behavior. Humor found its way into their artwork and stories. Wall paintings sometimes showed cats mischievously swiping food off platters, climbing into baskets, or tangling themselves in linens. In one particularly famous illustration, a cat is seen herding geese, a tongue-in-cheek reversal of roles, likely intended to amuse. Stories passed down in oral tradition included clever or lazy cats who outwitted their owners, much like modern pet tales. One well-known fable described a cat who refused to chase mice because it had learned that its meals came, whether it hunted or not, a clever swipe at spoiled aristocrats. Even in reverence, the Egyptians kept their sense of humor. They understood the joy cats brought, the unpredictability, the surprise pounces, and the occasional destroyed vase. These antics weren't seen as disrespectful. They were seen as divine personality. After all, gods didn't need to follow human rules. Household shrines and domestic rituals. Many households had small shrines dedicated to Bastet or other protective deities, and cats were often involved in these rituals. A cat might be gently stroked as prayers were whispered, or its presence invoked during childbirth or illness to ward off malevolent spirits. In some regions, it was common to light incense or offer food not just to the gods, but to the household cat itself. This wasn't indulgent, it was religious practice. The cat, in this role, acted as a conduit to the divine. By honoring the cat, the household aligned itself with spiritual protection. There are even records of cats being used in dream interpretation and fortune telling. A cat's behavior, its choice of sleeping spot, its sudden gaze into darkness, could be read as omens or messages from the beyond. One papyrus scroll details how a cat circling 3 times before lying down was believed to signal the arrival of unexpected guests. Another suggests that a cat refusing food might indicate bad luck or even a spiritual imbalance in the home. From companion to mourner, cats and grief. We'll explore the burial traditions in more detail in the next chapter, but it's worth noting how deeply grief over cats was experienced in daily life. When a cat died, entire families would enter a mourning period. Heads were bowed, songs were sung, and as mentioned earlier, Eyebrows were shaved in solemn tribute, a literal, visible marker of their sorrow. Children often asked priests to bless their departed cats, and some families set up small altars or grave sites in their gardens or nearby temples. These rituals reflected not just grief, but a commitment to spiritual harmony and cosmic balance. To honor the cat in death was to ensure favor from the gods in life. In summary, the everyday life of cat worshippers in ancient Egypt was a beautiful fusion of ritual, affection, and humor. From noble estates to humble farms, cats were loved, honored, and sometimes feared. They were household guardians, symbols of luck and prosperity, and participants in daily routines both sacred and silly. Their presence reminded people of the divine forces that moved unseen through the world, and perhaps more importantly, they brought joy, connection, and comfort in ways we can still relate to today. Chapter 4, The Cat Mummies, a Unique Burial Tradition. In ancient Egypt, death was not the end, it was a transition. The afterlife was a realm to be prepared for, a journey that required care, reverence, and ritual. And for the ancient Egyptians, this journey wasn't just reserved for people. It was extended to animals, especially cats. Cats weren't just companions. They were divine beings, vessels of protection, and sacred extensions of the gods. So, when a cat died, the response was as elaborate, and sometimes even more so, than what was reserved for human family members. The practice of mummifying cats became one of the most extraordinary and symbolic funerary traditions in Egyptian culture. The process of cat mummification, a labor of love. The mummification process for cats began immediately after death, carried out by skilled embalmers who approached their work with religious devotion. The goal wasn't just to preserve the physical form, it was to prepare the cat's soul for the afterlife. First, the body was cleansed and dehydrated using natron, a natural salt mixture used in all Egyptian embalming. The internal organs were carefully removed and sometimes stored in miniature canopic jars. In some cases, especially for temple cats, embalmers went a step further, perfuming the body, applying resins, and placing amulets within the wrappings to protect the cat's soul on its journey to the next world. Then came the wrappings. Strips of linen were wound meticulously around the body in decorative patterns, spirals, diamond shapes, even tiny headdresses. Some cats were given painted masks resembling bastet with gold or bronze accents. The final mummified cat might be the size of a loaf of bread or as large as a small child, depending on the ritual, the family, or the temple that commissioned it. The sacred industry, the cat mummy economy. By the later dynastic periods, especially the late period and Ptolemaic era, cat mummification had grown into a massive religious and economic industry. Temples dedicated to Bastet, especially those in Bubastis, Saqqara, and Beni Hassan, maintained entire breeding programs for temple cats. These animals were raised in sacred precincts, tended to by priests, and eventually sacrificed and mummified, not out of cruelty, but as offerings made by pilgrims and worshippers. Visitors to the temples could purchase a mummified cat as a devotional gift. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of lighting a votive candle, only far more elaborate. Wealthier individuals could afford more ornate mummies, wrapped in dyed cloth, adorned with bronze figures, or sealed in carved wooden coffins. Poorer visitors might opt for simpler burials, but the gesture carried just as much spiritual weight. In fact, this demand created such a high turnover of mummified offerings that some scholars argue it led to questionable practices. Some cat mummies, upon later investigation, were found to be empty, consisting only of bones, reeds, or even mud. While this may seem deceitful, it's more likely a reflection of supply and demand pressure rather than religious fraud. Cat necropolises, cities of the sacred dead. Over time, the accumulation of cat burials gave rise to what can only be described as feline necropolises, vast cat cemeteries containing thousands, even millions of mummies. At Bubastis, archaeologists uncovered underground tunnels filled with shelves of mummified cats, stacked row after row, wrapped in various degrees of ornamentation. At Saqqara, an entire tomb complex, once thought to be for humans, was discovered to house primarily cats and other sacred animals. In Speos Artemidos, another site dedicated to Bastet, layers of cat remains reveal generations of burials, sometimes interspersed with tokens and figurines. These sites are time capsules. They offer not only spiritual insight, but also biological and economic data. Analysis of the cat's remains has helped researchers understand Egyptian breeding practices, diet, disease, and even animal husbandry techniques. The overwhelming scale of some discoveries stunned modern scholars. In one 19th century excavation alone, over 180,000 mummified cats were unearthed and, tragically, many were destroyed or ground into fertilizer before their importance was understood. Today, we regard these sites with reverence and study them carefully, knowing they are key to unlocking the spiritual and emotional life of ancient Egypt. The emotional dimension, mourning, and legacy. While many cat mummies were temple offerings, a large number were personal. These were family pets, companions that had grown up with children, guarded homes, and shared in the lives of their human families. When such a cat passed away, it wasn't disposed of. It was honored. Mourning rituals might include a household-wide fast, ceremonial songs, and offerings of milk and bread left beside the cat's grave. Families often sought out priests to perform final rites. Much like they would for a deceased family member, they might hire embalmers or take the cat to a temple where a group burial could be arranged. These ceremonies weren't just about grief, they were about continuity. Egyptians believed in the soul's journey beyond death, and ensuring that a beloved cat received proper burial rites helped guarantee spiritual peace for both the animal and its human caretakers. Some wealthier families went even further. They had cat coffins carved from cedar wood, painted with scenes of domestic life or inscribed with hieroglyphic blessings. These coffins might include messages like, "May Bastet welcome you with open arms, whiskered one, guardian of my home and heart." Such inscriptions speak volumes. They reflect a worldview where animals were not lesser beings, they were souls worthy of love, ritual, and remembrance. Symbolism in death, why mummify at all? To the Egyptians, mummification wasn't just preservation, it was transformation. In death, the cat would enter the afterlife and potentially reunite with Bastet, Ra, or the other divine forces it had once represented. Its spirit could continue to watch over the family or become part of the greater cosmic order. The wrapped body symbolized preparation. The amulets represented protection. The ritual represented belief. The burial was not an end. It was a gesture of faith that life continued beyond the visible world. And through this sacred practice, cats transcended the boundaries of species. They weren't just pets, they were family, they were divine. In summary, the tradition of cat mummification in ancient Egypt reveals a society where the bond between human and animal was deeply spiritual, ritualistic, and emotional. Whether temple offerings or beloved companions, these cats were honored with care, devotion, and ceremonial grandeur. Their preserved bodies, carefully wrapped, adorned, and interred, remain silent witnesses to a civilization that saw the divine in the familiar, the sacred in the whiskered, and the eternal in the eyes of a purring companion. Chapter 5. Cats as symbols of protection and fertility. When we think of cats today, we often picture lazy stretches on windowsills or curious creatures chasing shadows. But in ancient Egypt, a cat's twitching tail and quiet presence were not just adorable quirks. They were loaded with spiritual and cultural meaning. These animals, seen in nearly every household and temple, represented two of the most sacred concepts in Egyptian society: protection and fertility. Let's explore how a purring pet became a symbol of divine power, defending families from unseen threats and blessing their homes with abundance. Cats as guardians of the home and spirit. In the bustling cities and serene villages of ancient Egypt, homes were small sanctuaries against the harshness of the desert and the chaos of the wider world. Every household had its share of threats, both physical and spiritual. That's where cats came in. A cat's mere presence was believed to offer magical protection. They could see what humans could not: spirits, curses, and evil omens. Egyptians believed that cats had one paw in this world and the other in the mystical realm. When a cat stared into a dark corner or suddenly bristled its fur, people didn't just shrug it off. They listened. To the Egyptians, this was a creature attuned to the spiritual vibrations of the universe. They were especially valued as protectors against serpents, creatures associated with chaos, deception, and destruction in Egyptian mythology. Stories often describe cats warding off snakes from grain stores and sacred spaces, acting as literal and symbolic barriers between order and disorder. One folk belief even held that if a cat chose to sleep at the foot of your bed, it meant your soul was safe for the night. The Bastet connection, divine protector of fertility and femininity. The goddess Bastet was the beating heart of this belief system. Depicted either as a full lioness or a gentle domestic cat, Bastet was a paradox, both nurturer and warrior. She was the goddess of fertility, childbirth, women's secrets, music, joy, and protection. Her dual nature meant she was invoked both in moments of creation and in times of crisis. Expectant mothers prayed to Bastet for healthy births. Families offered tributes for her blessing to conceive. Farmers asked for her favor to ensure a fruitful harvest. And when danger loomed, be it illness, spiritual curses, or enemy raids, people called on Bastet's feline ferocity to defend them. Temples to Bastet, particularly the Grand Complex at Bubastis, were centers of healing and celebration. Cats roamed these temple grounds freely, considered to be sacred incarnations of the goddess herself. Some of these cats were even believed to be oracles, and priests would watch their behaviors to interpret divine signs. Fertility in the fields, cats as agricultural allies. Fertility wasn't just about people, it was also about the land. Ancient Egypt's economy was rooted in the cycle of agriculture. The annual flooding of the Nile, the sowing of crops, and the harvest were all sacred rhythms that determined the life and death of the nation. Rodents, however, were the enemies of this abundance. Left unchecked, they could destroy grain stores and disrupt the food supply. Enter the cat, stealthy, agile, and ruthlessly effective. By controlling rodent populations, cats helped preserve the very lifeblood of Egypt's sustenance. This practical role translated quickly into a spiritual one. People believed that cats ensured the fertility of the fields, and thus the prosperity of the nation. Farmers often included depictions of cats in tomb paintings, showing them hunting vermin in lush fields or lounging near grain baskets, symbolizing abundance and divine favor. It's no exaggeration to say that cats were seen as guardians of survival. Magic, amulets, and protective spells. Beyond their daily duties, cats occupied a powerful place in Egyptian magic and symbolism. Their images were carved into amulets, painted on household walls, and woven into linens. These weren't just decorative, they were spiritual tools. Amulets in the shape of cats were worn by women hoping to conceive, or by mothers who wanted to protect their children. Bastet was sometimes shown nursing kittens, a powerful image of maternal fertility and divine nurturing. Children often wore protective charms with Bastet's image or hieroglyphs that translated to phrases like, "May the cat guard you," or "May Bastet's breath shield your sleep." Cats were also etched into funerary items, ensuring the soul would be protected as it traveled through the Duat, the underworld. In magical papyri and healing spells, cats were invoked to cure illnesses, protect against nightmares, and neutralize poison. Their eyes, which seemed to glow in the dark, were believed to see through illusions and lies. A single cat could guard the threshold between the mundane and the mystical. Cats in art, visual symbols of balance and blessing. Egyptian art was never purely aesthetic, it was spiritual storytelling. In countless wall paintings, reliefs, and statues, cats are seen resting beneath chairs, hunting birds, or curled in the lap of noble women. These images were not casual, they symbolized ma'at, or cosmic balance. One famous depiction shows a cat poised under a woman's seat, looking outward, alert. This symbolized vigilance and protection. The cat was watching the spiritual world, while the human focused on the physical one. Cats were also painted on temple walls and included in burial murals. In some tombs, They're shown sitting beside baskets of grain or fish, ensuring the deceased had both sustenance and spiritual protection in the afterlife. In others, they appear at the feet of gods, indicating loyalty and divine guardianship. Even the color of a cat carried meaning. Black cats were seen as powerful protectors, white ones as symbols of purity, and calicos were believed to bring particularly strong luck. In wealthier homes, cats were adorned with gold earrings or beaded collars, both ornamental and symbolic, linking the animal with divine elegance and authority. Legacy, the enduring symbols of power and creation. As centuries passed and Egypt fell under foreign rule, many old beliefs faded, but the symbolism of cats remained deeply embedded in the collective consciousness. Even after the fall of Bastet's temples, cats continued to be seen as omens, protectors, and companions. Their statues still guarded doorways. Their images remained in homes. The link between femininity, fertility, and feline grace endured long after other deities were forgotten. Today, the echoes of those beliefs remain. We still associate cats with mystery, magic, independence, and maternal warmth. We still tell stories of cats sensing spirits or guarding homes. These aren't modern ideas. They're the inherited mythology of one of the most spiritually rich civilizations in history. In summary, in ancient Egypt, cats were far more than pets. They were living symbols of protection, fertility, and sacred power. From the fields of farmers to the inner chambers of temples, these whiskered creatures embodied grace, survival, and divine presence. They defended homes from danger, watched over children, ensured the harvest, and connected humans to the gods. Their very essence represented a balance between fierce strength and gentle nurturing. In honoring them, Egyptians revealed what they valued most: harmony, abundance, and the ever-present mystery of life itself. Chapter 6. The Decline of Cat Worship, a Historical Shift. The reverence for cats in ancient Egypt endured for over 1,000 years, through dynasties, floods, and foreign intrigue. They were more than animals. They were symbols of divinity, fertility, and spiritual power. Yet, like the shifting sands along the Nile, Egypt's religious and cultural landscape was not immune to change. Eventually, the golden age of feline worship faded into history. In this chapter, we unravel the complex tapestry of religious evolution, political upheaval, and societal change that led to the slow but steady decline of cat worship in Egypt, a transformation that mirrored the civilization's own dramatic evolution. From divine to decorative, a waning flame. By the time of the New Kingdom period, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, cat worship had reached its peak. Temples like those dedicated to Bastet and Bubastis were flourishing, and cat mummies were being produced in such large numbers that they filled entire necropolises. However, even at its height, there were signs of ritual commodification. The production of cat mummies became so commercialized that many were hastily embalmed or even faked, wrapped bundles of linen containing bones, straw, or partial remains. This industrialization of sacred practice slowly began to erode its spiritual authenticity. As the rituals became routine and mechanical, the deeper spiritual reverence began to dim. What once was an intimate connection between people and deity risked becoming performance over piety. The rise of Akhenaten and monotheism. A major turning point in Egyptian religious history came during the reign of Pharaoh Akhenaten, circa 1353 to 1336 BCE. Akhenaten is famous, or infamous, for his radical religious reforms. He replaced Egypt's vast pantheon of gods with the worship of a single deity, the Aten, the sun disk. This monotheistic revolution swept away traditional deities, including Bastet. Temples were closed, priestly orders disbanded. Statues of former gods were defaced or destroyed. In this new, sun-centered theology, there was no room for divine cats. Though Akhenaten's religious experiment lasted only a short time, it caused significant disruption. Even after his death and the reinstatement of polytheism, the confidence in the old gods had been shaken. The role of cats as divine mediators had been called into question, and while they remained respected, the sacred awe they once inspired began to lose its universal grip. Invasion and influence, the Greeks and Romans. Egypt's cultural independence would suffer further under foreign rule. With the Greek conquest under Alexander the Great, 332 BCE, and the rise of the Ptolemaic dynasty, Egyptian religion was forced to adapt once again. The Greeks admired Egypt's ancient customs, but sought to synchronize them with their own pantheon. Bastet was blended with Greek deities like Artemis, goddess of the hunt and moon, and occasionally Hecate, a mystical protector figure. While this preserved aspects of cat worship, it also diluted its original meaning. Egyptian deities became hybrid figures, interpreted through a foreign lens. The final blow came with the Roman annexation of Egypt in 30 BCE. Romans had little patience for animal deities. They were pragmatic, militaristic, and deeply suspicious of rituals they didn't understand. While they adopted many Egyptian symbols and even deified some pharaohs, the sacred role of cats was largely sidelined. By the time of the Christianization of the Roman Empire, worship of any animal form gods was considered pagan and heretical. Temples were closed or converted, and sacred animals, once mummified with care, were now targets of scorn or neglect. Christianization and the suppression of animal worship. As Christianity spread through Egypt in the first centuries CE, religious doctrine turned strongly against the traditional Egyptian deities. This included not only gods like Bastet, but also the practices surrounding animal veneration. Christian leaders wrote treatises denouncing idolatry, specifically targeting the worship of animals as superstitious and morally wrong. Churches were often built atop old temples, signaling both spiritual conquest and physical replacement. Cat imagery, once revered, was now associated with witchcraft or demonic influence. Early Christian texts in the region sometimes interpreted cats, especially black ones, as sinister, a drastic inversion of their former protective symbolism. In this new religious framework, cats survived only as animals, not as sacred intermediaries. Their divine role was relegated to memory, myth, and forbidden folklore. Cultural amnesia and folk survival. Despite the institutional suppression of cat worship, folk traditions proved more resilient. In rural areas, especially those far from centers of Roman or Christian control, stories persisted. Grandmothers still whispered of cats seeing spirits. Farmers still welcomed cats into grain stores, not only for their utility, but out of an inherited reverence. Some Coptic Christian tales even absorbed fragments of cat lore, reimagining them as protectors in parables or allegorical figures. This cultural blending meant that while cat worship as an organized religion had disappeared, its legacy persisted in customs, oral traditions, and everyday practices. Egyptians continued to keep cats as pets, often treating them with a level of respect and affection that astonished Roman and later Islamic travelers. What had once been divine now became deeply cherished, even if not explicitly worshipped. Archaeological erasure and rediscovery. For centuries after the decline of cat worship, evidence of this once dominant practice lay buried. Literally, temples to Bastet were forgotten. Cat mummies were looted or ignored. The cultural memory of feline divinity faded as new civilizations rose. It wasn't until the 19th century, during the height of European exploration in Egypt, that archaeologists began uncovering massive cat cemeteries, elaborate feline statues, and thousands of amulets once thought lost to time. These discoveries shocked the Western world. Victorian scholars and travelers were fascinated and somewhat amused by the idea that one of the most advanced civilizations in history had worshipped cats. Museums filled their cabinets with mummified cats, not always realizing the profound spiritual importance these remains once held. Ironically, the romanticization of ancient Egypt in popular culture during the 20th century helped resurrect the image of cats as mystical beings. From horror films to children's cartoons, the connection between Egypt and cats was rekindled, albeit in a whimsical or exoticized fashion. In retrospect, the transformation of a sacred symbol. The decline of cat worship was not a sudden collapse. It was a slow unraveling, shaped by the tides of theology, empire, and ideology. From the radical reforms of Akhenaten to the cultural blending under the Greeks, to the suppression under Rome and Christianity, each shift chipped away at a tradition that had once defined Egyptian identity. Yet the story doesn't end in tragedy. While the gods fell and the temples crumbled, the cat endured. It transitioned from goddess to guardian, from divine avatar to beloved companion. Its sacred aura may have dimmed, but it never truly disappeared. In this way, the story of ancient Egypt's cat worshippers is not just about what was lost, it's about what managed to survive, against all odds. Chapter 7. Conclusion. A legacy of whiskers and wonder. As we draw this journey to a close, it's hard not to marvel at the curious path that cats have walked, from the dusty alleys of ancient Egyptian cities to the cozy couches of modern households. What began as a practical alliance between humans and skilled rodent hunters blossomed into one of the most unique relationships in religious and cultural history. We've seen how the Egyptians saw more than an animal in the cat. They saw a bridge to the divine, a protector in both life and death, a being worthy of elaborate rituals, sacred statues, and eternal devotion. From Bastet's temple festivals in Bubastis, echoing with music and laughter, to the quiet grief of a family shaving their eyebrows for a lost feline companion, cats were loved in ways both grand and intimate. The echoes of Bastet. Even now, the legacy of Bastet endures. Her statues stand not only in museums, but in the collective imagination of people around the world. She represents a duality that many still admire: the tender nurturer and the fierce protector, the graceful homebody and the formidable huntress. In many ways, Bastet's symbolism has never been more relevant. In an age where people seek both comfort and empowerment, it's no surprise that the cat, her sacred animal, has remained so beloved. People turn to their cats for solace, for a sense of peace, and for companionship that feels almost transcendent. Cats haven't just survived in modern culture, they've thrived. They're meme legends, social media influencers, emotional support animals, and the stars of everything from ancient poems to viral videos. And while few today think of their cat as a divine being, many still treat them with the awe and respect once reserved for gods. Sacred companions in the modern age. Is it so far-fetched to say that a sliver of ancient reverence still lives on in how we treat our cats today? Think of the way we carefully curate their diets, photograph their antics, talk to them as if they understand, and sometimes even include them in our wills. We build shrines to them on Instagram, we commission portraits, we mourn their passing with heartfelt tributes. All of this echoes the same tenderness, the same ritualized love that ancient Egyptians expressed thousands of years ago. And isn't that the power of cultural memory? Even when the temples have long since crumbled, the pyramids worn by wind and time, something endures. A thread connects the priestess of Bastet to the modern cat lover curled up on the couch. A lineage of affection, of mystery, of admiration for these creatures who seem always to know more than they let on. The timeless appeal of the cat. What is it about the cat that has held human attention across continents and millennia? Perhaps it's their independence, how they command respect without demanding it, or their mystique, the way they silently observe us, blink slowly and stretch like royalty. Or maybe it's their contradictions, aloof yet affectionate, serene yet playful, delicate yet deadly. The Egyptians saw all this and more. They recognized the cat as a mirror, a reflection of the universe's balance of chaos and order, of tenderness and strength. In doing so, they didn't just create a mythology, they touched on something timeless, something we still feel every time a cat curls in our lap or stares out the window like it's reading the stars. Honoring the past, enriching the present. As we leave behind the sacred tombs, the golden statues, and the bustling markets of ancient Egypt, we carry with us more than just knowledge. We carry a renewed appreciation for a civilization that understood something many of us still strive to articulate, that animals, and especially cats, are not separate from us. They are part of our stories, our rituals, our families, and sometimes even our identities. So the next time you find your cat perched high on a shelf like a little pharaoh, staring into the middle distance with quiet confidence, remember, it's not just being cute, it's standing in a long, unbroken tradition of feline grace and mystery. The final word. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time, whiskers, and wonder. We hope you've come away not only with new knowledge, but with a deeper connection to the extraordinary history that links us to the ancient world and to the cats who walked beside it. If this video sparked your curiosity, made you smile, or reminded you of your own furry friend, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more immersive dives into the unexpected corners of history. Until next time, may your days be peaceful, your heart curious, and your lap warm with a cat who might just be descended from a goddess.